showing we don't need roads.
Seriously, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into this. Mike, I'm going to start with you. I want to talk about your experience filming this versus It Follows, because I'm curious, when you're working within the horror genre, like, to what degree do you allow yourself to learn lessons from past movies you've been in and kind of pull them over to work here? And then to what degree do you have to separate the two projects and kind of treat this one like a completely new thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much time since It Follows, so it has felt like, I mean, it's just a completely different experience. But I think for me, what's so important with the horror genre and acting in the horror genre is just making it as grounded as possible. And I think that was something that was super important with It Follows, because it was very fantastical what was happening, and you needed the audience to go on this journey with you and be there and be invested. And so that was something I think that David, Robert Mitchell, and I, we really wanted it to just feel so real. And I think everyone that he cast in that movie was just so grounded and so believable in this kind of insane scenario. So I think that was also really important for this movie, is just pulling on my own personal experiences and bringing that into Julia.
You know, a lot of people, when describing you and talking about this film, they keep throwing out the moniker Scream Queen. So I'm curious, for both of your perspectives as experts in this, at what point do we get to start calling someone a Scream Queen? Like, how many hits on the resume do you have to have before we start getting to use? Like, is there a certain number?
I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I feel like I feel like if you've done a solid 2 real classics, then you get to call yourself a Scream.
Okay, so it's set. We've got, you're good to go. For both of you, I feel like you often hear stories of actors being kept away from horror villains on set to kind of build that sense of unease and tension. I think Robert Englund famously stayed away from all the kids on Elm Street, and the kids from Scream didn't get to meet the voice of Ghostface till years later. Did you guys make any conscious choice to keep Byrne away so that it would sort of translate into more tension on screen?
I don't think we made the choice, but I do remember there was a night when we were having a cast dinner. I think it was a few days after shooting, and it was me and Maika and Carl and the producers, and of course we invited Byrne, but I think Byrne did want to keep a little bit of a distance, and he didn't want to just socialize with us. But that being said, Byrne Gorman cannot hide his natural charisma and his just sweetness and wonderfulness. So, he wasn't in character. He's still just, yeah.
It's so weird because I just interviewed him not long ago for The Offer, and you're absolutely right. He was the most charming person I've ever spoken to in my life. And then seeing him in this, it was kind of a reminder of oh, that's right. You're an actor and you're really good at what you do. Yeah, sometimes we forget that. There's a really interesting idea presented near the beginning of the film, that's sort of this idea that when you hear about something terrifying, like maybe walking by a scary crime scene, it kind of embeds itself in your mind and you start seeing things that may or may not be there. So I'm sort of curious, I might be reaching here. How does making a movie like this affect how you start to see other people? Do you start noticing people in a different way or start noticing behaviors that maybe you didn't see before?
I mean, I feel like I made this movie because I already feel a certain level of anxiety and paranoia. So it hasn't increased it in any way. If anything, I also don't know that, I think I said once that horror can be a little therapeutic. And to an extent, that's true. You're digging into things that frighten you. And it's a way of sort of taking control of it. So it can be helpful. But I also continue to fixate upon this idea of what if in a way that's totally unhealthy. So I don't know.
There's that great line in the movie though, where I think she says something about ending up with your throat cut and I told you so on your lips. And I just thought because no one ever wants to be the person that says I told you so in a horror movie, because it usually means something terrible has happened to them. Maika, we were talking about Byrne. He's so incredible in this and just has such a great unsettling presence. And I want to talk about the difference when the villain is supernatural, as it was in It Follows, versus a flesh and blood human in this film, and how that changes your perspective as an actor, actually having him standing in front of you.
Oh, well, it's a lot easier having a real person versus well, nothing, or a man in a green suit covered. Yeah. Also, Byrne is just absolutely incredible in this and terrifying. So it made my job a lot easier, which I am grateful for.
Because he's just, you could just reach out and touch him if you wanted to.
I certainly could.
Chloe, when the streets here in Chicago were emptied because of COVID, I remember thinking, like, I wonder if filmmakers are going to take advantage of this sort of isolation. And most filmmakers talk about the hardships of filming during COVID. And I'm curious if any, to what degree you were able to use it in your favor, because I feel like the lack of crowds all over the place in the city kind of gave this very, like, I felt for Maika, because I felt like this very, like, isolated, like I understood what she was feeling in that sense.
Well, it's very funny, actually. There were plenty of people out on the street. We just had to chase them away because they were wearing masks, and we didn't want this to be a specifically COVID movie. But I really do feel like the sort of COVID aspect of it helped in the way that I think, like, everyone was a little bit on edge. I think that we all had been living in isolation for so long. So I really do feel like emotionally there were things that for this particular movie, the pandemic was sort of built for. And I think it kind of speaks to a lot of those feelings. So in that way, it was helpful. But yeah, no, those streets of Bucharest were not abandoned in any way.
You guys, you nailed it. I'm about to run out of time, so I'm going to try to squeeze in one more. There is a brief moment in the film that I think is honestly one of the most, like, chilling moments I've seen in a movie in a long time. And Maika, it's when you're at the window and you see the silhouette of Byrne across the way, and you wave, and then there's a quick beat, and then he waves back. And just, like, thinking about that just sends, like, a chill down my spine. And I can't figure out for the life of me why that moment, that sequence, works as well as it does. So I'm curious, from an actor's perspective and Chloe from a director's perspective, like, why does that scene work so well? Because on paper it seems simple, but it's not. It is so incredibly effective.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed that. I think, yeah, I was sort of worried when I read that scene. It was one of the scenes I love the most, but I was also worried about it as a director. Like, how do you make someone waving scary? So it was sort of just about, like, building up to the moment, but also I think primarily about Maika's performance, and how much she just really sells, like, the terror of it. But yeah, I think the thing that I like about it is that when you actually see him wave, he's actually sort of out of focus behind her, and she's not even looking at him, which is unusual for our movie, and that we're sort of breaking point of view. But it's almost like that feeling of, like, even if you can't directly see something, it's like the hair that sticks up on the back of your neck. Just, it's almost that sixth sense, that instinct about something right before you actually see it.
Maika, what do you remember about filming that day?
Well, I was looking at nothing. So it was all just, having to kind of work myself up to kind of get there. So honestly, it was kind of hard. But yeah, that probably is, for me, it does not many things that, I mean, obviously, just because I know how the story goes, doesn't really scare me, but that is one moment that gives me chills watching the movie.
This is a really stupid question. Was the apartment a set? Was it not, like, I am an absolute idiot. You nailed it, because I could not.
That's good.
I was just about to ask you if it was Byrne across the way, like, waving. Now I feel like an idiot for it. And of course, like, it makes sense. I got 1,000 more questions for you. I wish I had more time, but I absolutely love this movie. And I promise I'm not stupid. I promise I watched it. But seriously, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day, guys.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.